Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Glossholm, for having us today. And it's a great turnout. I was here about 4 years ago in 2016 to talk ELDs, and we've kind of come a long way. So in preparing for this, it's a bit of a reflection back and also talking about what we're facing going forward. So today's what I'm going to cover today, what really happened on December 17th, 2019. Many of you will know what that date means. So what's changed since then? Or what has changed for all of us? And what's really stayed the same in terms of what we're doing? And then tips for the road ahead, what you may want to start thinking about in this new era. And then I would love to open it up for a little bit of discussion about what your thoughts are and what you've learned in this journey. So what really happened? Let's look at this really quick timeline. Well, it's a 4-year journey. December 2015 was when the ELD's final rule was published. Now, that wasn't the time frame for compliance, but in 2017 of December, industry as a whole ditched paper. So no more paper logbooks for drivers. And December 17, 2019 is that date when the industry as a whole ditched not only paper, but also legacy AOBRD systems. So it's actually a huge story about how the industry has actually adopted change and has implemented change in their business to go from a paper-based world to an electronic solution, to be able to do hours of service compliance in a completely different way. So on this full compliance date, so as of December 17th of 2019, what we're facing is all carriers and drivers that need to have hours of service records have to keep it in terms of an ELD. And that ELD must be self-certified and on the FMCSA's registry. And CVSA, which is the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, which is a group of all the safety officials across all 50 states, have come out and said the penalty for not using an ELD is an out of service. It means that you don't have compliant rods for that driver when they need one. So instead of out of service for 10 hours. But in terms of that day, to me, represents a huge milestone for the trucking industry. It's when the entire organization ditched paper, ditched an old system, and moved to that electronic world. And it changes the way we do things, the how, but not necessarily the way and why we do what we do with those. So what did it bring to bear, though, in terms of the ELD mandate? It actually put a spotlight on an issue that's been going on in the background. And with ELDs, it was a way that it was recording time without rounding. So if a driver was like, let's say I took 28 minutes and I'm just going to round it up on paper to 30 minutes, that no longer could hold, because an electronic system, when you start driving, it's going to start capturing that in real time. So what that really exposed was, were the drivers actually complying with the hours of service regulations for what it really was meant to be doing? And so that more precise recording of their hours has led to that question about, is there enough flexibility within those hours of service rules in order for the drivers to be able to complete their day? And in terms of the wider context, the drivers, as you know, have a lot of challenges on the road, right? They have limits in terms of where they can park and whether there is enough space for them to be able to find the right parking space. And when they can't find it in, let's say, a public area, they have to find it where they have to be charged for it. And are you going to be able to support the driver to be able to pay that amount to rest properly? So those have led to FMCSA's efforts to look into the hours of service. And I think we've had some really good insights shared by Dave as well as Warren about one of the areas that they're looking at exploring changes. Short haul, should this 12 hours be extended? Should the air miles radius be wider? But also the way in which the drivers need to take their 30 minutes rest break. like Warren was describing, does the driver actually have to take it off duty or can they take it on duty? And they've been willing to listen to the industry and the truck drivers and how they're actually managing their day to do what they need to do and be on the road. Spend that time doing the actual productive thing of driving. So the final rule is expected, and the industry experts have been speaking about, the time is now, but also we know that we're going into an election cycle, and with that comes a lot of other challenges, right? And Janice spoke about, the legislative pains within the state itself at the moment, but looking at the federal regulations and the decision making at that level, we're expecting this to be one of the critical, significant changes, and if it is to be made, then we expect that before the elections. So my guess, and put me down as my actual initial guess, would be that it's around, before September. So, but what does that mean? Those changes will be announced, but there may be a time frame for everybody to get implemented. This will require ELDs to be able to adopt some changes to the rule sets that are implemented right now that supports your drivers out on the road, because there are some changes that are slight, but also some changes that are quite significant. So there will be time that will be given to the industry as a whole to be able to adopt these changes. So watch this space. Now, there are 5 things as I was thinking about this in terms of the things that have really changed as we turn into that full compliance world. And what are they? So first and foremost, ELDs actually standardize the enforcement process. There are, as we all know, there's 400 registered different ELD devices on the FMCSA's registry today. They all look and operate slightly different, but in terms of the way it needs to work and show things to the enforcement for checking against the hours of service rules, that's actually going to be the same, right? What is it? The ELD must transfer the data from the ELD at the roadside, as well as also, if you are ever subject to a safety audit, the ELD data needs to be transferred from the back office system to the auditor, right? And they need to see it on a system called EROAD. And this is an example of what it looks like. This tool is available to you in a public way. If you are able to access an output file from your ELD system, you can actually see what it looks like using that public tool. So check that out. That's actually a really good way for you to be able to see what the enforcement sees at the roadside with your drivers, right? And this is a tool where they will see it in the same way across all those 400 devices. It's not just one device showing it one way and another device showing it another way, but it will expose any issues that an ELD has in terms of generating the data to be presented in this way. So in terms of an enforcement, just to go over this really briefly, there are 4 different statuses from an EROAD transfer. So if an ELD is transferring the data, there are 4 statuses that it presents itself. One is it's valid, no issues, nothing wrong with it. It's got all the information that the driver has captured, and the ELD is working correctly. There is a warning. What does this mean? It means you may be missing some information pertaining to the headers or something within your carrier's information that's not being transmitted correctly. So a lot of the things that I've witnessed around this is USDOT numbers. Did you put the correct USDOT number in the backend system? If that's missing, this is going to trigger a warning. Invalid VINs. If there needs to be a CMV VIN number that will show for that day that the driver drove a vehicle. Now, if the VIN number was not automatically pulled by the ELD from the vehicle, then you have the obligation on the back end to be able to put that in for the driver. If it's invalid because it's a 17-digit number, alphanumeric, and you put in O instead of a 0, for example, that's going to show an invalid VIN number. Or there is an error, and this is where it is significant, because error means that the roadside inspector or the auditor is unable to view the output file because there is something fundamentally wrong with it that's not working correctly. And this is more of a technical error, and it may be to do with the ELD provider not being able to generate the output file. And if you are getting this type of thing on the web EROADs, then you know that that's an issue with the ELD provider, and you have to work through that. And then the next thing is not showing. It could be if this happens on the roadside where the inspector and the driver attempted a data transfer, but it didn't go through, there are a couple of reasons why. You know, these are two systems trying to talk to each other. The connectivity between them could not function. You know, cellular connection is required on both ends. And if one of them goes down, then it may not show. The web EROADs is also a system that FMCSA maintains, and there have been instances, very slight, and it's going extremely well at the moment, so it's not necessarily this, but web EROADs could be down as well. So enforcement may not be getting it in real time. Okay, so in that case, there will be a default back to some of those backup options, and the backup options are a display on the ELD or a printout if there is a printer. So it's an either or option. An ELD does not have to have a printer, but if it does, then it can generate that and show it to. So this is a chart that we were able to get from FMCSA that shows the increase in the successful rate of those data transfers. And I'm showing this because you can see where we started in December of 2017 when things were a little rocky. It was like, is this about to go live? Is this going to be great? It started off around 38%, and then it skyrockets, and it goes really well. In August of 2018, right, and this is before AOBRDs get ditched, we're at 85%. In October, we had an update from FMCSA, and we were able to get a really cool, good stats. It's sitting around 95% success rate across all the ELD providers. That's really good for the industry. Again, it's actually more about you rather than the ELDs itself. It's showing that drivers actually know what they're doing, enforcement are actually able to see it, and it's working, right? So what's my number two thing that has changed or is going to change? So FMCSA have been testing and piloting this concept of an offsite audit. As you know, safety audits are done when there are areas in the CSA basics which are elevated. If in terms of an offsite audit, if there are one or two areas of the CSA basic that goes and gets elevated, that may trigger a focused offsite audit. And they've been piloting this for a little while, but they are planning on extending it out because it has been super successful in terms of the efficiency, not only for FMCSA, because they don't have to send somebody out and sit with you and do this, but they're able to save time and money for both sides to be able to conduct this type of an audit. And if there is a significant issue, then they will go out and do an actual on-site audit. But this enables FMCSA to be able to look at risks more closely. So why does this whole ELD thing fit together? Because ELD means that hours of service information, the RODs for your drivers, are actually electronic, and you can send it digitally for them to be reviewed. So if you are higher up in that hours of service basic, then this is something that you may want to look at because this is coming. This is something that's going to change. As we go more and more towards this electronic and digital world, there are going to be safety audits and things that are done off-site. So make sure that you're understanding how the ELDs are able to transfer that EROAD, the file to EROAD so that this can be done remotely. Malfunctions and data diagnostics. So AOBRDs had some sort of triggers that showed anything that what tampered with, or it just goes down. ELDs, the compliant ELD, must have a way to record malfunctions and data diagnostics. So just a quick update, data diagnostics is something where the ELD recognizes there may be something going wrong with this device. It's not getting some of the data that it needs to be getting, and it's kind of triggering a warning. There's nothing for you or your drivers to significantly worry about, just look at it. Malfunctions is a little bit more severe. It's saying that there's something going wrong where it's not getting the power source, or it's not connecting to the engine. It doesn't have the functionality to be able to transfer that data to EROADs. And so this needs to get looked at, right? And so there are, as we've seen, even in the paper world, you know, drivers sometimes have fudged their logs. Yes? No, it never happened. Okay. So in the ELD world, there are ways to cheat the system, right? You've heard some of the drivers attempt multiple different ways to be able to fudge the logs, right? One way, unplug and replug. Oh, I just do this one extra move and then I'll plug it back in. In the ELD world, it will be recorded. And that is actually a malfunction. Why? Because the power got removed for a period of time, and that does get recorded, right? It didn't have connection to the engine, therefore why it will be recorded. And those will need to get explained before that malfunction can be turned off. So this is an area that requires both the drivers and you to cooperate with that ELD provider to get it back up and live. And there is a time period to resolve malfunctions. It's 8 days. Within 8 days, you have the drivers go back to paper to record their time, and then you must get off that paper. And if you need an extra time, then you must actually, there is a process to ask for an extension from FMCSA. And I'll go through that in a separate slide. This. So there is a process to ask FMCSA for extra time if you need that in order for you to work on that malfunction, i.e. if it is significant and if it is a device, I mean, it's a computer. So how many times has your phone not operated or your computer just gone down? In that case, you will need a replacement or you need to get it serviced. And it may take longer than 8 days. And sometimes over-the-road drivers, and I've seen this multiple times, an over-the-road driver has an issue, right, with a device that's malfunctioned out there. He will not be able to come back to your terminal so that you can replace that device within 8 days. Maybe they're on the road for a period of time because they're going across the country and back. This has happened to a couple of drivers out there. In that case, you will need to submit an extension from an FMCSA, right? And we've also heard a couple of bigger ELD providers where they've had issues and they've been trying to roll out a fix, and it takes longer than 8 days to get it on your device, right? In that case, this is the extensions process. Another example is if you decide this provider is not for me and I need to change, but it's going to take me longer than 8 days to plug in a new one or install all of it in my outfit, then this is the process, because you have the opportunity to explain why you need the longer days, right? So this is the page. It's on FMCSA's webpage that explains what you need to do. And it will go to the divisions administrator locally, but also it will go to headquarters, is what I understand it to be. And it is fairly simple. I think there is a really good process behind the scenes that will give you that in pretty quick turnaround time. Another area that's changed with ELDs, unidentified trips. What is it? Really quickly. With an ELD, all drive time is captured. All drive time. It means if a driver goes, oh, well, it's not going to capture it on my logs because I don't need to log in. Sure, but that time will show up on the ELD, and it will show up when it gets transferred to EROADs too. So the officer can look at it. So what's the obligation on the driver and the carrier? To manage that as fast as possible and turn it around. You have to either assign it to a correct driver, or you have to be able to explain that trip and close it out with a comment. And an ELD tool is able to help you to do that. I've heard some big companies with more than 200 vehicles creating about 5,000 or more on a monthly basis. So manage this. This is an area that can expose the driver at the roadside if they can't explain this. So in terms of what state, so those are my ideas of what's really changed with ELDs and some of the things that you have to do or quite pay attention to. But in terms of what's really remained the same. So again, how you do things have changed, but why you do things may not have changed. And this is where I was thinking, what does the driver and their carrier still have to do today that they were to do before ELDs came along? First and foremost, driver input is still required. The driver using an ELD thinks, oh, I can just plug it in and I'm good to go. I don't have to touch it. You do have to touch it. ELD doesn't know whether you are going into the sleeper or you're going off duty or whether you're actually on duty. So those different duty statuses that are not driving is still required by the driver. We see a lot of drivers forgetting to go off duty at the end of the day. They just leave the truck and log out and I'm like, I'm good. But if you finish drive, it's going to go automatically to on duty line, and it's not going to know it that you are actually off duty. So coming back online, it may have captured that time that you were off as on duty, which means you don't have hours the next day, right? So those are some of the things that may still need to get looked at by the carrier and the driver. There are other things that the driver still must do, which is to enter the correct trailer numbers and note the right bill of lading details, right? Because those are the form and manner stuff that the ELD system is just not going to know. And so keeping track of those and also certifying. It's up to the driver to certify at the end of the day. It's a quick press of a button now rather than a whole signature, but it's still something that the driver has to do. And then reviewing it on a daily basis. It's still what they need to do. That's what they were supposed to do. Second thing, the carrier's responsibility to manage and make sure that you're reviewing and managing the driver's logs to make sure that they're correct. Yes, it's, again, different in terms of how, but the fundamental why you have to do that, because you want to make sure that your driver's logs are correct and up to date, and you have all of them in good time, and make sure that there's no malfunctions going on and that kind of thing. That responsibility still stays. It's just how you do that. Maybe different. I did put something in here, which is the proper use of yard move and personal conveyance. So again, with ELDs, all drive time is captured. Now the drivers will have the ability to use these two different statuses of yard move and personal conveyance if the carrier allows those to be there. But again, when a driver is supposed to do that, it's still up to the carrier to explain what is a yard for you. Where can you use personal conveyance and when can you not do personal conveyance? And I think Warren explained some of the changes to the personal conveyance rules. But again, those responsibilities of the carrier to make sure that the drivers are recording it the correct way is still there. The importance of training, and actually maybe with the ELDs, it's even more or less. Some people have said it's actually less because you just train them on it once and they're good to go, and then you just have to keep them up to date with it and just do refreshers. But making sure that the drivers know how to use the device and also how to do certain things, like how to do a roadside inspection correctly, or how do they certify, and how do they edit their logs. Those training requirements are still there. Dispatchers should know what they are supposed to do in terms of checking the time before they can dispatch it out, right? Now, ELDs give you that visibility to be able to see, does this driver actually have the time to be able to take this next load on, right? Fleet managers and safety managers still having to review, and do they know what they need to be able to do that review? And there's trainings around that. And the mechanics, DVIRs, are they getting it the right way from the drivers? You know, this one, it may or may not be on an ELD. So I get this a lot of the time. This question: is DVIR part of the ELD mandate? No, DVIR does not have to be. With the ELD, you could choose to still do paper DVIRs today. That may change in the future, but it's not part of needing to do it with the ELD. So along with the training, there's been actually really good materials that FMCSA have developed and are making it all public and available to carriers and drivers. And I would really recommend that you take a look at some of the training that they have available. It's quite interactive, and it's actually a walkthrough slide, and it's all audio as well. And it's in that second link below. They do have really cool checklists and things for the driver as well as the carrier. So I would recommend taking a look there. And also they've updated their FAQs, which is you can do keyword searches, and it's more interactive. So take a look at those. Those are resources publicly available. Now, in terms of some of the tips that I would have for you out there on the road, first thing, check the way that you've set up the ELDs and check the settings for your drivers. Why? Because the setup actually impacts and flows down to whether there will be issues or errors with that data transfer. So not entering in the right DOT number, not having the correct VIN number. So we've had an instance where we've noticed if you don't select a state for your driver's license, that actually triggers an error. So is the driver's home terminal's time zone correct? Just make sure that those little setup pieces are done because they will show in that EROADs. Second thing I would say is be proactive. I think it's a fantastic idea that I've seen a lot of customers and carriers conduct is mock audits. Try and do a DOT audit of your own internal processes and see where the weaknesses are and see where there are opportunities to correct. And maybe even work with other safety consultants out there that can actually help you to do this and see what, get an independent perspective. Do a mock roadside inspections with drivers. I've heard this example, and I think it's the most mind-blowing idea, because drivers actually go, oh well, I'm good, I can do it, but then when they get put in front of an actual enforcement officer, they don't do the same thing that they would do when they're in a training room. So try and do a mock roadside inspection with your drivers. And I think ODOT and others have materials available for what they will need to see in a roadside inspection. So be able to explain the data transfer process from the ELD that they use for the enforcement. Is it going to be Bluetooth? Is it USB because you support the local option on that ELD? Or is it web services and email, which is a telematics option? The drivers may not know. And that stumbling block at the beginning of the interview will kind of set the tone for the rest of that inspection. The drivers need to carry certain things, and it can be something that your ELD provider works with you on. They need to carry a user manual for the ELD that they're using, as well as instruction cards for malfunctions and instruction cards for how the roadside inspections go. Because sometimes the inspector wants to see what they need to do and step by step. And be confident about their ones. Are they a short-haul driver? Be able to explain that. Are they taking an exception today? Be able to explain that. Did I do agriculture exemption? Explain how that shows up in their routes. So that mock inspection that I heard from a couple of our customers, it's an amazing idea. Manage by exception. I think ELDs because it's electronic and there's so much information that it's actually feeding into you to be shown at the back end. Manage by exception. And I have this amazing quote from Samba Safety where it says 1 in 10 drivers is a serious risk. So this part really gets me. The final 10% of your drivers that are responsible for 40% of your accidents. What is it saying? There's only a small portion of your driver pool that's actually the ones that need your attention the most. And so how do you get to that? It's about the way you get way you see that information. How do you raise it to the surface that you manage your risks? And I think it's about, you're getting so much information from the ELD provider, but it's about how the solution presents that to you so that you can manage those risks faster. And it's about reporting. Is there ways, are you getting the notifications that you need for risky behavior around speed or idling? And also look for trends. Are there any drivers that are having the most hours of service violations show up? There should be an hours of service violations type of report on the back end that you can actually manage. Are there any reports that you could filter to see which of the drivers are doing certain things more than others? And I think that those are some interesting tools that are only available because we went electronic. Leverage more from your ELD. I think ELDs you're doing that because you're being asked to do that from a mandate standpoint. And there have been some drivers that have pushed back and have come through it reluctantly, but it's an opportunity to go, oh, actually, it's helped me along the way, or okay, well, I have to do this anyway. Are there any other parts of the business that can benefit from going electronic as well? And there have been some really great stories out there about actually by being able to see other information around my driver's performance, I was able to build a program to be able to reward great driving, right? Incentivize good behavior, but also are there any other areas that you could do in a modernized electronic way? So with those, I will open it up for any questions, but also I would love to hear what your thoughts are on what's changed, what's kind of stayed the same, or are there any lessons that you want to share with the others in the room?
I've noticed that personal conveyance cannot be changed to driving by read the regulations and trying to figure out why it is that you have it that way. And it happens if a driver commutes to work and then he forgets to switch and then he's calling me in a panic because he forgot to switch. And I'm trying to change to a more restrictive status and wondering why it's not allowed.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think FMCSA have been able to give some technical guidance, and that was one of them that we've asked. The reason why it's not able to be changed at the moment is because PC and going to drive is not allowed because it's you can't change to drive time. You can't change any of the drive time, and there is requirements around you have to select and deselect personal conveyance, and they ask for annotation if you are changing that away. So we will ask for further clarification. I think Joe spoke at our user conference, and that was one of the questions that did come up, and he said, I'll take it away to look at. So I'll follow up on that one.
Can you get cited or fined if you're speeding on your own?
So there is, great question actually. There is actually no speed information that shows for the enforcement officer. And also there's only certain vehicle information like the odometer reading at the duty status changes. And in terms of when you're driving, there's only a location and engine hours and odometer at 1 hour intervals. So it's really hard for the enforcement officer to tell speed using that unless, you know, they do the manual calculation on an average and to divide it. But no, there is no speed information that gets sent over to you.
Okay. The reason why I ask is, like, say for instance, the starting point is in Clackamas, and you're heading out to the Dalles, and you get there within a certain
amount of time. Yeah, that's so. Again, they're calculating it using the what is the average speed you could have done to get there at that point, which is what they have do on a paper log too. It's not because of the ELD necessarily giving them the information. But yes, they could do that manual calculation to go, okay, divide the amount of miles driven by the time you said you recorded it on. And yes.
Our ELD provider, you also mentioned that the option for web services as well as email transfer. Because it appears though currently the email transfer is sent it directly to the officer. It all goes to FMCSA and access it through that portal. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So all the options actually end up at the web services at the end of the day. Email is another mechanism by which it goes to the web services. And what the ELD provider actually has to do in terms of the email is there is an actual email that gets sent over to an FMCSA email address, and then from there it goes to web services. Correct. So what FMCSA recommends as the preferred method is web services. Go directly to that.